Life is a bridge. It connects our birth with our death. We're all born and we're all going to die. At birth is the beginning of life. That is the combination. Who we are is a combination of body, a physical, earthly body with a spiritual, holy soul. We learn from the mystics that our soul is constantly being breathed into us by God. We are connected to God through this, so to speak, breathing that God breathes our soul, the part of us that is holy, the part of us that is spiritual, that is housed within our physical bodies. That's who we are, and that's how we travel through life, through this bridge, from the time we're born until the time we die. And death, according to Jewish tradition, is the separation of the soul from its body. That's death. This week's Torah portion is called Achrei Mot, after the death, and it speaks about the death of two of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu. So Nadav and Avihu, they go into the holiest place in the tabernacle. They go into the Holy of Holies. They go in with an offering. Both of these acts of going into the Holy of Holies with an offering, neither of these things were commanded by God. And the consequence of their going in is that they die. Their soul is taken from them. The soul separates from the body and they die. That's death, right? Death is the separation of the soul from its body. So Achrei Mot, what happens after the death? The soul continues its journey. The soul never dies. We, who are a combination of body and soul living in this world, will die, and our souls will separate from who we are physically in this world. Our body is a vessel that holds the soul. Our body is the garment that clothes the soul. At death, there's a separation of those two. And that's what happened to Nadav and Avihu when they went into the Holy of Holies with a fire offering that wasn't commanded. So there are many commentaries given as to what Nadav and Avihu did that necessitated, or that was, the consequence was their death. But I would like to concentrate on one of them. There are many commentaries that suggest that they were drunk when they went in. There's a commentary that says that they were very arrogant. They chose not to get married, or nobody was good enough for them, or that they didn't have children, or they wanted to be the leaders and they spoke ill of Moses and Aaron, who they wanted to take over the leadership from, that they spoke evil of Moses and Aaron. So there are a lot of different commentaries that speak about what Nadav and Avihu did that necessitated their dying. The one I'd like to focus on is a commentary given by the Or HaChaim. And what the Or HaChaim says is that by going into the Holy of Holies, they had an encounter with God that was so awesome and so powerful that their souls couldn't stay tethered to their bodies. Their consequence of their coming so close to God was that their souls left their bodies and they couldn't live, that it wasn't sustainable for them to stay alive, that their souls left their bodies. And we read about this in the story of Mount Sinai, when the Jews were encamped at Mount Sinai and God appeared to all the people. And the Medrash teaches us that the encounter with God was so awesome and so huge that the people lost their souls, that their souls were drawn back to the source, drawn back to God, and they died. They were brought back to life. They heard the second of the 10 commandments, or the 10 utterances that God uttered to the people, and they died again. They were brought back to life. They said, we can't do this anymore. Moses, you go up to Mount Sinai, you get the Torah, bring it back to us. But the point I want to bring out is that an encounter with God that is so intense that we can't live is one that we have to be careful about. So we can't access that. We can't, in this world, in our lives now, have an encounter that's so close to God that we lose our souls. But we also learn that when Moses was on Mount Sinai and he wanted to understand God, he wanted to know God, he wanted to understand God's ways, and God said, you can't know me and live. And the sequitur of you can't know me and live is that once we are untethered, once we are disembodied, once our soul separates from our bodies, then we can have an encounter with God. So that's after death, we have that encounter. When we read about the story of Nadav and Avihu's dying in the Kadosh Kadoshim, in the Holy of Holies, we also read what happened afterwards, and we read about Aaron, their father, who was silent. Aaron was silent in the face of the death of his two sons, and he had to continue the service in the tabernacle. He continued to be the high priest and continue with the inauguration of the temple, of the tabernacle. But there's this after the death. What happens after death? I've just come back from a funeral from a dear friend's mother, and I would like to dedicate this learning to her, Devora Bas Breindel Shmuel, that her soul should have many ascensions in the spiritual realms by who we are in this world. But after death, there's silence, there's continued life. We continue to live. We continue to walk in this world and to bring godliness into the world and bring goodness into the world. And that's why we're here. That's the mission. We're on a bridge from life to death, but we have a purpose for being here. And God has faith in us that we will contribute to the goodness of the world, contribute to by being godliness and light into the world. That's why we're here. And when our mission is over, or when our time is up, then the soul separates, and we, the living, continue to live in the world. We continue to walk in the world. We continue to work on ourselves and improve ourselves. In this week's Torah portion, when we read about the death of Nadav and Avihu, it's juxtaposed with the service of the Yom Kippur service in the temple. What happened on Yom Kippur? On Yom Kippur, we read about it in this week's Torah portion. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, goes in to the holiest of holiest places in the tabernacle on the holiest of holiest days on Yom Kippur. And he brings the offerings that are required, that are commanded, and the hope and the prayer is that we will all, he represents us, Kohen Gadol, the high priest represents us, and that we will all be cleansed, we will all reach an atonement for things that we have done that are not the correct things to have done, and that we'll be washed clean, and that we'll be able to continue as a clean new slate. We move on, and the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who is the holiest of people on the holiest of days, in the holiest of places, brings about this atonement. And it's commanded for the Kohen Gadol to go in. It is not commanded for Nadav and Avihu to go in with their fire offering that wasn't commanded. And the result of their closeness to God, says the Or HaChaim, is that they lost their souls. They became untethered. So Achrei, after the death of Nadav and Avihu, we understand that their souls went up into the highest realms. Their souls continued the journey beyond life. But we, the living, continue on. We read about Aaron being silent. We read about Aaron continuing the service and continuing to do God's service in the tabernacle. We don't read anything about the mother of Nadav and Avihu, but I imagine that she mourned her children. Deeply mourned her children, and also continued to function in the world. We are enjoined not to mourn excessively for our dead. Yes, we have holes in our hearts, and yes, we miss our loved ones with an intensity that's even impossible to describe. And at the same time, we have to live our lives, and we move on in the world, and we're connected to the souls of our beloved, and we're connected to them, and we can continue to bring an ascension, whatever that means, in the highest realms by how we act when we bring goodness into the world because of our loved ones, because of what they taught us, because of what they showed us, because of who they were, and we continue that legacy. We continue walking in their ways. We say Kaddish for them. We give charity for them. We learn Torah for them. We are kind like they were kind. We visit the sick like they visited the sick, whatever it is, fill in the blank, that we raise them up in the highest heavens also. So we are continuing to create, and we're continuing to be in relationship with our loved ones. They have not died in the sense that they've disappeared. They've just moved into a different realm of existence. And that's the way that Judaism views death. Death is a separation of the soul from its body that housed it, that clothed it, and it moved into another dimension. And we continue to be in relationship with our loved ones even after they have deceased and they have left this world. So life, as we know it, is considered a bridge. It's a bridge between birth, which is the beginning of the journey, and death, which is the end of the journey. And we are all on that journey. The destination is the same for all of us. We're all going to die unless the Messiah comes and things change. But right now, that's the natural order of things, is that we are born, we travel through life, and then we die. But what we do in between, what we do on that bridge, is meaningful and supremely, infinitely meaningful. That we work on ourselves, that we try to be better people, we try to bring God into the world, we try to connect, we try to open up and connect ourselves to the divine in the prescribed ways that we can't experience God the way Nadav and Avihu did, or the way that the Jewish people did when they had a revelation of God at Mount Sinai, or when they had a revelation of God at the Reed Sea, when the sea split, they had a revelation of God. But we don't have those revelations of God. God is hidden in our world. We don't see God, but we seek God, and we try to let God in, and we try to experience God, and we try to hone our spiritual antennae and have experiences that connect us beyond the physical confines of our time-space box that we live in. So my blessing to all of us is that we recognize the gift that life is, that we recognize that our lives are fleeting, and that they will end at some point, and use that to use our lives with purpose and meaning, and to work on ourselves to be better, to try to connect to God, try to bring more light into the world, more goodness into the world, because that's why we're here. And we should all live to 120 and continue to do that, and continue to bring more light into the world.